Hello and welcome to Betterman Brief. My name is James. Today we're going to be talking about the power grid. This is going to be part 2. We're going to go a little bit more into the battery storage side of it, as that was something I briefly mentioned. I said it didn't have to purely be chemical lithium-ion based batteries because that's what we generally think of. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the different kinds of energy storage that we can utilize to support the power grid. And then we're going to actually do a part 3 as well. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you're interested in seeing what part 3 of the power grid is going to look like. For the battery portion of the power grid, the energy storage portion, like I said, there's a few different ones. You've got your chemical, which is your lithium ion. Those are reusable energy storage methods. One that's not would be gas, right? It's energy stored chemically, but it's not really considered reusable because once the CO2 is exhausted out, it's a little harder to recapture it and put it back into the machine again. Lithium ion is great because you just reverse the flow of the electrons and then it recharges the battery. And then you can discharge the battery when you need the power pulled back from it for the grid. Another one that we often think of is water-based battery or energy storage. So it's just using the hydroelectric power plant, and then you just couple that with some kind of large reservoir storing the water, pump the water from the bottom back to the top. And that might be powered by wind or solar. So whenever you're getting those excess energies, but the grid's not needing it, you're still storing that energy via pumping it back up into the reservoir. And then the hydroelectric power plant can generate the power on demand for the grid by draining the water back down through the hydroelectric power plant into the lower reservoir. So that's a method that you can store energy using water, and then it helps to stabilize the grid while still getting to use those green energies that a lot of people are really pushing for. Another one that I'll mention is any kind of mechanical kinetic type battery storage. They'll have these huge drums, pretty much just massive weights of, it can be some kind of massive metal cylinder with a electric motor on it, and then when you have extra power, that motor starts spinning the giant drum, and as it spins faster and faster, you're storing up more energy in the form of kinetic energy. And then when you want to tap the power and reverse that electric engine into a generator, so it starts slowing down the wheel spinning, and that's what's generating the power now. Because it's such a massive heavy drum, it's storing a lot of kinetic energy. The electric motor just slowly pulls the energy off from it and then puts that back onto the grid at a point again when you're needing more power. So that'd be another way that you can store the excess energy if you're in a situation where you produce excess energy outside of when the grid wants it. These are not bad either, not just for like wind or solar. They're also really good too for nuclear or even your traditional coal, your gas, any of the traditional energy production forms too, because the grid does spike and drop. And all of those like to be a little bit more stable on their production and then slowly raise and slowly fall off. So any of these energy storage methods that can quickly spool up to take a bunch of that demand off from the regular energy production sources while they spool up is actually going to benefit and help stabilize the grid. So these are definitely methods that do help stabilize the grid regardless of what the power source is that's nearest to where the power is being drawn from and where these are located. And then obviously we have our lithium ion that we've already spoken about. Another interesting one that they have is heat storage. And so what that is, it's some kind of material that can absorb a lot of heat, and then oftentimes it'll be couched in something like sand, other material that can act as an insulator while not reducing the heat itself. And then similar effect where you just extract the energy out of the heat. There's a few different ways you can do it. Obviously you have your traditional steam turbine method, and then you also have the photovoltaic cells similar to a solar panel, but in this case it's utilizing the infrared frequency, and so it's taking the radiating heat and turning that into the electricity. You're just using a different spectrum of the light, and you're just taking advantage of the heat spectrum, in particular what we think of as heat. So that's another form of energy storage that we see being utilized. So we have a bunch of different methods of storing energy when we're having peak production outside of peak demand. And then the more of these that we can bring online and the cheaper we can get these to be, the more we're going to stabilize the grid, regardless of the power source we have on the grid that is running. So these are just going to be a net benefit to the grid. Unfortunately, they're more expensive to implement, thus we don't see widespread adoption all over the grid for these unless it makes financial sense. For the most part, you're not going to see them getting adopted as quickly unless we can get these prices to come down on these different forms of energy storage. In that case, we'll get to see a lot more adoption. There's also a few, obviously, limitations to different ones. So, for example, the water reservoir method, you really need an elevation difference, substantial one too. So you see that one working better in mountainous areas where you can block off a higher level, maybe valley and then flood that area to be your upper reservoir, and then same below. So you need to have geographically beneficial setups for some of these. And that's where, depending on which one you're looking at, it'll matter the area you're in, how cheap it is to produce or construct the battery, and then long-term sustainability of it and maintenance cost for it. Because obviously different ones have different life expectancy for them before you're going to have to go through and either do a maintenance phase or totally replace it, depending on what it is. If it's something like lithium-ion, then it's just a replace of the cells for new cells. So that kind of sums up where we're looking for the battery portion of the power grid. I hope this was interesting to you. And then if you're interested in part 3, we're going to be covering a little bit more of how electricity works, delving a little more into that so you can get a better understanding of how electricity is flowing around the grid. Subscribe if you're interested to watch part 3. And if this video was helpful to you, like it, and then feel free to comment any ideas, thoughts that you have on this topic or videos you'd like me to cover in the future. Again, goal with these videos is to create a short, condensed kind of topic starter to get your interest piqued if you want to then go do research on your own and delve into it. And then if not, you have a base understanding of whatever the topic was. So if you're interested in that, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for future videos. This was Betterman Brief. My name is James. Hope you have a good day.